Barry,
Howdy.
good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for holding down the fort last weekend. I was in Hawaii.
How'd it go?
It was a very quick whirlwind trip. And I think I left here, I left SeaTac around 6 a.m. Hey, Stacy, how goes? And I got to Hawaii probably, around 1 or, early afternoon Hawaii time. And then my flight out was around noon on Sunday. So it was probably 23, 24 hours.
Oh, it was a short trip.
Yeah. I basically went to go help my dad get his book done, generated, backed up, zipped up, sent to the publisher, and then backed up again. And then we went to go have sushi.
So that was it.
Yeah. And then I slept and then, had breakfast and then went to the airport afterwards and headed back. Because, I had to work on Monday. So the original arrangements would have had me getting into SeaTac around 6 a.m. or 6:07. Then I'd have to fight Seattle traffic to get back to the island, which is about 3 hours. So, yeah, Seattle traffic is horrible. It's as bad as Bay Area traffic. Probably as bad as Boston traffic. Probably worse. Anyway, Stacy, welcome. Haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, I was here. You weren't here some of the times.
Yeah. Sam's been absent quite a bit in the last 3-4 weeks, I guess.
Yeah, and I think I'm not going to fly the last 2 weeks of the year. So hopefully I can still stay home and mostly be home. But starting January, I'll probably be resuming all this travel again. And that long deferred trip to India might still take place sometime in Q1.
Nice. Very nice.
We'll see.
World traveler.
Not so much the world, more California traveler. How you guys been?
All right.
I'm good. I'm going to have to leave early. I may be able to leave and come back, though. I'm not sure. We'll see if it's still going on.
I did mention.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, I just figured I'd wait and see who's here because I didn't want Barry to be sitting by himself.
Yeah, I've had Barry sit by himself many times.
And that's why I showed up.
I take it you didn't have a chance to mention to your dad the mathematical model of emotions and learning. I was hoping that he would have a chance to look at that and give you some feedback, but
yeah, I'll do it at some point. This trip was
too short.
yeah, I think that would have been a longer conversation.
Oh yeah,
I'll do it at some point.
Yeah. By the way, next Wednesday, I was scheduled to give this talk to the Lexington Computer and Technology Group next February.
Sorry, I don't have an answer for that.
Was that my voice she was responding to?
Sam's.
Yes, you said the word COMPUTER and it responded.
Oh, okay. So, but the guy who was originally scheduled to do next Wednesday has a conflict. So I told him I could do mine on short notice. So they asked me, would I do mine next Wednesday? I said, yeah, I'll do it next Wednesday, which will be on Zoom and anybody can attend, but it'll also be recorded. So it'll be the first time in a long time that I've given that material. Actually, I guess the last time was in one of your sessions, I think, here. Didn't I do that in a GCC session some months ago?
You did part of it, but I'm thinking that the one you're going to give is going to be of on a higher level.
Yeah, this group should be able to be perfectly comfortable with calculus to the same depth that I do the talk. Well, I'll find out. But most of these people are, graduate level techie type people. So,
well, I don't know what time it is, but I'd really at least like to hear the recording and gather whatever I can out of it.
So this group meets at 10 a.m. on Zoom on Wednesday morning, and typically the sessions run for about an hour and a half.
Yeah, I have a call at that time, but if you can get me the recording, I really want to listen.
Yeah, so the recording will probably be out a week later,
Okay.
within a week
That's
later.
10 a.m. East Coast time, you're saying,
That's
right?
East Coast time, correct?
Okay.
Yeah, the group also meets at the community center. They do hybrid meetings, but they might not bother with the hybrid meeting because I'm going to be presenting on Zoom, because I'm going to be presenting, screen share. So there's not any good reason to go to the community center and sit there in a room with try and look at a screen, 20 feet away from you on the wall.
Is it for an hour or longer?
The sessions go from 10 to 11:30 nominally. There's always some housekeeping and give and take and other stuff. And I'll go as long as I can keep going within the time frame. It depends on how much conversation you get. There's a couple of people who tend to pipe up and then get long-winded, and that tends to cut the amount of time for me. And
Those would be
might not
perfect
get,
case studies for you.
I know. So I might get through all of it, all three, sections, or I might only get through one section and maybe part of another. So we'll see how far I get. And if I don't get through all of it, they can schedule a follow-up for the rest of it if they want to. And which, like I say, I can do it on short notice. It's not like I'm just making up this talk for the first time.
How long are the announcements and bookkeeping or housekeeping at the start of the session?
They can go anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, depending on, especially the hybrid meetings. The hybrid meetings, the poor fellow who plays my role of getting all the husbanding of the gear, he's not as quick as I have been at the Toastmasters to get everything working correctly. So sometimes they have lost as much as 15 or 20 minutes trying to get the hybrid gear all working correctly.
Barry, Sam just wants to know how late he can show up if he decides to come.
Oh,
Well, I am saying that the earlier it is Pacific time, the more quickly it is I can probably attend.
yeah.
And my meetings typically start at 8:30, although on occasion I have Europe sessions starting as early as 6. But if
Well,
I know that it's happening, then I can avoid that.
So 10 a.m. is 8 a.m. your time. So I should be partly into my talk by probably 10 or 15 minutes after the hour, maybe even earlier if they don't, especially if we don't do the hybrid meeting, then we won't have all the nonsense with the hybrid meeting. We'll start probably easily within 5 minutes of the top of the hour.
Actually, I think 10 is 7 my time.
That's right. Yeah, my mistake. I'm getting the adjustment for the time zones wrong. So that'll be 7 to 8:30 your time.
Yeah. So how likely are you when the minute somebody gets loquacious and long-winded for you to say, what emotion are you feeling right now?
That's
What's the
actually
block for learning?
Yeah, that's actually pretty interesting. There's one guy, an MIT alum. He might even have been a professor. I don't know, but he's very long-winded and he interrupts and then just talks forever. And they have a devil of a time getting to stop talking so they can get on with the rest of the presentation. And this is the one guy, when I offered to do this talk, he said, oh, that's going to be interesting. And I go, he'll be there.
You see that at every conference, every stage presentation, there's always somebody asking a question, which is not really a question, it's just another talk.
Right, yeah. And they typically tend to jump ahead about 2 slides or so and ask a question that you're going to come to in about 10 more minutes. So, but we'll see. In the past, I have actually given this talk, not as a talk, but as a conversation with the audience. The one time I did it in 2002, I think it was, at a conference called Frontiers in Education, which is mostly teachers attending. I prompted the audience, the attendees, to respond to questions, and they constructed the talk slide by slide in response to my Socratic questions. And that worked extremely well with that audience. I don't know that it will work so well with this Lexington and Technology Club.
I know for some speakers, see, I organize, actually for 16 years, I think I might have mentioned, I'm a co-chair of the Silicon Valley Engineering Leadership Circle.
Yeah, you mentioned that you want to schedule me to present to them.
Yeah. So we often allow presenters the choice of either doing a whole talk, or if they prefer not to prepare quite so much and want it to be more interactive, an interview format actually works great. That way the interviewer can do the
Yeah.
organizing
Right.
and moderate and adjust timing and whatever, and the person could just respond. So I found that that's a great option for people.
Especially on Zoom, because if you're screen sharing, you can't really see the little tiny postage stamps of all the other people. Whereas the host of the session, because I will have to be looking at my material I'm presenting. So the host might be watching the little strip of postage stamps and be pausing to interpolate when people are looking like they're falling off the wagon or something. And I'll probably prompt him to, feel free to do that. It's really, really hard on Zoom to tend to audience reaction. For one thing, you can only get, I think, something like, I don't know, 7 or 8 across the top of the screen. So if there's more than that present, you got to scroll that little thingy, which there's no realistic way, especially since the thing I'm sharing is going to be on that monitor and the Zoom is going to be on that monitor. I really, really have a hard time attending to the audience.
Yep. Cool. And how you been, Stace?
Good.
How's the puppy?
My puppy, he's doing good. Almost 15.
No. Harley. Marley?
Marley, with an M, Marley.
Marley. I have a friend who has a cat named Harley, and you got a dog named Marley, and I always have to go, which is which now?
Think
Harley
love.
or Marley.
Think love.
Bob Marley was the not rap. What was his genre called?
Reggae.
Reggae, yeah.
Okay. I have 2 possible subjects. The first one is a question I've been actually pondering for about a decade. And I figure this would be a good forum to raise it. So when I first discovered social media, I thought, how do I connect? Who am I connecting with? And there's sort of this little exploratory, you start with your physical network and you sort of work that around and work the degrees of freedom business. And I thought, okay, so everybody must be doing that, right? Depending on their arrival in social media and the number of channels that they adopt. So I've been observing that in the first few years, probably the first 6, 7, 8 years, there were always these brand new communities that I was constantly being exposed to, whether it's climate change ones, or change maker ones, or light maker ones, or life coaching ones, or success industry ones, or gene keys ones, or enlightenment ones, or et cetera, right? I believe, and this is just myself, so I can't state it as anything other than observation and interpretation. I believe that that has slowed down some.
What has slowed down some?
The arrival of these new communities, for me anyway, for me discovering and encountering these new communities. So I'm also seeing, at the same time that I think that is slowing down, I'm seeing the same people connect in those communities. Like, for example, I see Neil Davidson show up on more and more of these communities that I connect with. I'm seeing Jerry, I'm seeing the various people that I have connected with haphazardly and ad hocly through the first, part of that decade, kind of show up in more and more of these common communities. So I'm wondering if these communities, which used to be all scattered and not connected, are slowly getting more and more connected. And therefore, we're kind of seeing that that this mycelial network connectivity phenomenon might actually be happening. And so I was thinking, Barry, how do we model this in a K degrees of freedom, N numbers of members, frequency of ad hoc connection, but also in common vernacular? Maybe these communities are emerging.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe it could be that I've just gotten lazy looking for these communities, and so I'm just getting a slice of what's really going on. Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking of the same thing because I came across, because of all the tourists on Twitter, there are people who are talking about leaving Twitter in favor of an alternative. And I guess the number one alternative to the Twitter model is Mastodon, which I'd heard of, but I never looked into it. So I looked into Mastodon to see what the hell it is. And Mastodon basically replicates the interface of Twitter, but there's not just one instance for the whole world. You can have individual instances, which are kind of narrow topics, but then you can federate all these instances so that you can have your local neighborhood and then the federation of other neighborhoods. And so as I was thinking about the fact that I had never looked at Mastodon, mainly because I hardly ever use Twitter, I started thinking back historically to all the different technologies that we have played with, used, or at least heard about. And I made a list of them. And I was astonished at how long the list was. And I shared it with my friend Nancy. I think Stacy knows Nancy Matlack Williams. And I shared this list to her. I wrote to her about a week ago. I said, golly, we are now into our 4th decade of online community systems. We all started with direct Unix logins and email, then innovated with Unix Talk, IRC, Usenet Net News.
Don't forget Right.
Usenet Net News, then Micromuse and all the Lambda Moos and other MUDs and Moos and Muses, Apache, the web server.
And MUX and BBCs.
I didn't mention BBCs, no. The Well, Electric Minds, Brainstorm, Slate, AOL, Motet, conferencing on the web, World Crossing, Blogger, WordPress, Facebook.
CompuServe, AOL.
I did mention AOL. Yeah, I left it. Yeah, you've already picked up 3 that I don't have on my list. Yahoo Messenger, Jabber, Elg, Twitter, YouTube, Wikipedia, Google Buzz, Google Knoll, Google Sites, Weebly, FaceTime, Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn, Discus, Diaspora, Skype, Second Life, Google Chat, Google Hangouts, Google Duo, Zoom, Microsoft Meet, Discourse, Mattermost, Nextdoor, Clubhouse, Mastodon, and on beyond Zulip and Zebra. And then I still had left out several that you mentioned.
Did you include UUCP?
Well, I did say Usenet Net News, which I think,
No, that's NNTP. That's not UUCP.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, so I left out probably half a dozen that you've thought of, and some others. I left out TikTok.
Gopher, Waze.
Yes, I left out Gopher and Waze. Yeah, so there's probably maybe a dozen more that people have heard of that slipped my mind when I made this list. And it's just astonishing that in 35 years, we're halfway into our 4th decade. And think of all these different technologies that we have attended or played with or lived in for a period of time. It's just an astonishing list.
By the way, Barry, you're missing all the ones that the gamers use.
Well,
right?
I did say Discord.
That's only one. Twitch is another, and then
yeah, Twitch, right. I forgot about Twitch.
There's a bunch, and maybe
so maybe if I paste this in, you can remind and fill in the all the ones that I missed. So I remember I left out TikTok and
by the way, before Yahoo Groups was eGroups. eGroups was arguably the game changer. It could have been, but those people didn't know what they had. And it got bought by Yahoo, and then it got lost.
Yeah, so I've already forgotten bulletin boards, I guess.
Yeah.
Spell it. And I'm going to stop there because I've already evaporated, half of the ones that you mentioned that I left out.
Good thing we're recording, in case anybody's interested.
But it's just, it's just an astonishing list when you start to think about, how many different technologies and instances of similar technologies, competing versions that we've had access to in 35 or so, maybe even 40 years, if you go all the way back to UUCP, I guess.
There's another one that was iconified by this guy named Tim. What was it? My something or My Life or
MySpace?
MySpace.
Oh yeah, MySpace. Yeah. So I didn't put in MySpace. I was never on MySpace. So there's a bunch of them that I basically didn't think of because I never even paid any attention to them or used them. And then all the ones that the gamers used that, other than Discord, I didn't really. I think I knew about Twitch. I was never on it.
And then
So
there's a
yeah,
bunch of
maybe you
dating
can add the missing ones there, and then sort of have a
Okay, another
retrospective.
one.
All the ways we've done.
ChristianDating.com.
What? Oh, the dating ones. Yeah, yeah. I never used those. But anyhow, the other point is that way back at the beginning, when we were trying to create online communities with these various technologies, and community building was a major challenge for us, who were not really into political community building. Nancy and I wrote a retrospective on community building, actually more than one. We wrote a couple of things on community building way back in the 90s. And those little 1.5-page articles are still up on the website. So yeah, we thought a lot about community building and community self-governance models that would go with community building, and communities of interest, communities of practice. There were three. There's communities of interest, communities of practice, centers of excellence. I think there were sort of 4 categories of kinds of communities. So go ahead, Stacy.
No, I was just going to say, I'm finding this very humorous because I didn't come on to social media till late, and up until 2015, the only people that I spoke to on social media were friends and family.
Yeah.
It wasn't until late, excuse me, it wasn't until late in 2015 that I started spreading out. And so when Sam talks about being amazed that all these people are connected, I've always known that you guys are connected. What messed me up is I thought you guys all knew. So I thought all you people knew each other very well, and I would talk to you each as if you all knew what the other one was doing, and you didn't. And that really threw me off a lot. So I find that really interesting. And the other thing is, I'm going to say, Barry, I was mildly insulted last week when you, and I understand you were just trying to be accurate, but you held out the possibility that I might not necessarily be a free thinker, but that I follow free thinkers. And I wanted to explain that it was the sound that I heard that made me go there. And it wasn't that I would just say, oh yeah, that's a good thought. These were thoughts I was already having. So people that I've connected, it's because you hear the music that's familiar and you say, yeah, and you go there, and then you keep looking for the other missing notes to the symphony.
Right. Yeah.
And so when Sam is talking about mycelium, there is a connection between all these people, and maybe they didn't find it before because they were all in their specialties. I don't know. I've always been like an observer, just paying attention to like the bigger picture. So it's not surprising to me. And there are certain qualities that most of these people have. Maybe it's the leadership qualities. But what I know that I look for are people that, groups that maintain a certain level of honesty. I watch the communication styles, and these people that we're talking about, they, nobody's perfect, but even when they stray, the community will bring them back into check. And so, yeah, I'll stop there because I don't have the words to articulate what I'm trying to say, but it's not some surprising phenomenon to me.
Yeah. So do I owe you an apology or not?
No, you don't owe me an apology because that was your real feeling. Your real feeling was you don't know if I'm an independent thinker. That was honest. I know I am.
Well, you're right about, you have something on your mind that you don't know how to put it into words, to articulate it to an audience. And then you find somebody who's already thought of it and found a way to articulate it clearly. You go, that's, I'm glad you said that. I would have said the same thing if I had known how to say it as well as you just said it. And so
And I
you do
try to
kind of
bring
pick
them
up,
together.
you
try
pick
to
up the
bring you guys
vocabulary.
together.
So one of the things that I do when I do word of the day is about maybe a few times a year, I'll introduce a neologism, not just a regular word of the day, but a made up word that needs to be part of the vocabulary because the concept is sort of floating in the air, but there's no vocabulary to name it. You can describe it kind of metaphorically, poetically, but you got to give it a name. And if it doesn't exist, you make one up. And if you're lucky, it sticks. Like the one that I had brought up in Sam's discussion, Raumic, the ratio of words uttered to meaningful information conveyed, that metric.
I'm very good at that.
And the fact that people get annoyed when there are these blowhards who can talk and talk and talk. At the end of 20 minutes, they haven't said a damn thing.
See, I'm more interested in talking about why they get annoyed. That's more relevant, I think.
Why the listener gets annoyed or why the speaker is annoyed?
No, why the listener I mean, I know
Oh, yeah.
I know many of the reasons why the listener gets annoyed, but I think that's interesting to bring into awareness.
Yeah, because you're sitting there, you're sort of being compelled to pay attention, and it's not resolving any uncertainties, you're not resolving any gaps. You're just hearing, verbiage. And I kind of pick out Jordan Peterson as a worst offender in that regard. He can talk for an hour, and at the end of it, you haven't learned anything you didn't already know.
But you could turn him off. You don't
Yes.
have to be polite.
Yeah, if you're not in his actual physical class, yes, you can turn him off. Yeah.
Sam, what are you thinking right now?
That you were trying to say something when Barry was saying, and I missed what you were trying to say.
Oh, I said it. Did you have a question? What didn't you understand?
No, it was just that I don't think Barry noticed that you were trying to speak, and that's why I was trying to make sure you said it.
Oh, I did. I think he did.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's about whose feelings are you pondering, the speaker or the listener, the audience or the presenter, and how well is the presenter articulating something that needs to be said but hasn't been said well so far out loud.
For
Well,
that
in
specific,
For that specific inchoate, you have an inchoate concept that hasn't been put into words yet in a good way that sort of spotlights it.
What was the second topic that you wanted to bring up, Sam?
it
you
was
were giving
actually
us a
one
choice.
that I was reserving for Sunday. Let me go bring that up. Aha. This is a systems thinking and mathematical reasoning question. The question is a spoon or a fork better for stirring instant coffee or hot chocolate?
The way you phrased that question, though, I have a problem with, because there's two ways you could read the question. I don't know if the focus is on the hot chocolate versus the coffee or the spoon and the fork.
Or the stir, which is that little.
Yeah, I mean, I could read into it what I think you mean, but just as long as we're being scientific here, let's get the wording right.
Yeah, in fact, I think I used bad grammar.
Yeah, from the
Yeah.
point of view of physics, the spoon does a better job of getting the liquid in motion. But in terms of, like if you go to a coffee shop, they don't use either. They use those little sticky thingies, the little plastic stirrers that you throw away.
So
Would
we
it
think this,
depend
but
on
do
the
we know
speed?
this? Sorry, go ahead, Stacey.
would it depend on the speed at which you would twirl the fork? Barry, that question's for you.
Oh, no, I think because the spoon has a big flat space and not gaps in between, it's going to push the liquid more, what's the right word, more gregariously. So you're going to get more
Missibly?
stirrage. Say what?
Missibly?
Missibly, yeah, that. 'Cause-
That's a
Yeah,
neologism, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I never have tried using a fork to stir coffee or cocoa, and I would never think to use it because it's like you're rolling a boat and you got to paddle with strength. You want to paddle that doesn't let the water slip through.
Okay, so in there, I'm hearing an assumption, Barry,
What's the assumption?
that the more mass of liquid you move, the more likely the mixing will take a place, will happen.
Yeah, I think that is a hypothesis.
It's a
Well,
hypothesis. It's a good one.
Yeah, I think it's
Here's my
realistic.
thinking around this as well.
It's
If you
testable
have
too.
four tines in a
Yeah.
fork, right? Or three, whatever, okay?
Yeah,
And
typically,
these are moving,
right.
right? There's actually less direct, uniform movement of the solid being pushed, right? It's going to flow between the tines. It's going to go in front of the tines. And so the flowing, especially if the tines are making a circular motion, I have another hypothesis, which is, would that cause more mixing? Or would the solid movement of the spoon cause more mixing?
In coffee and
Wait,
cocoa, I would-
Barry. I'm looking for a line of reasoning, and I'm exploring a line of reasoning, not necessarily looking for an answer. I am interested in the thinking with.
Well,
rather than
right, I
an
think
answer.
it depends on material. So if I was stirring up egg whites and egg yolks, say to make a French toast or something, I would use a fork. I do use a fork.
Exactly.
a
You
fork
wouldn't use
if-
a spoon for that, right?
Right, if I'm doing egg yolks and egg whites, I want them mixed up to make, say, the French toasts, whatever you call that stuff, the broth, then I use a fork. But in coffee and cocoa, I would always use a spoon. I never would consider using a fork for
Is
coffee.
it because nobody ever introduced the possibility of using a fork? Like, for example, would you use a knife? A knife is very similar to a spoon.
No,
I could use a knife.
Yeah,
I would use
exactly.
a knife before a fork.
yeah. If I didn't have a spoon, I would use a knife or a stirrer. I mean, those little stirrers have almost no cross section.
Okay, so
But
here's
also they're
another perspective.
disposable.
Here's another perspective, okay? Usually if I'm eating something, especially in the US, I'm more likely eating with a fork rather than a spoon. At least, because I'm not a child right now, right? More children use spoons, more adults use forks, right? So if I'm going to take the trouble to just make myself a quick cup of coffee, I say, well, I got a fork here. Do I really want to use a clean spoon, or can I just use the fork that I've already got? So there's another aspect of it. It's not about the mixing.
And spoil the taste of your coffee with the vinegar or whatever is in your food.
Unless I've exercised the capacity of my lips, to peel the food off the fork sufficiently.
Yeah.
So that's another dimension to that question, right?
Yeah.
So that dimension didn't immediately pop up when I first asked the question.
Yeah. But like Stacy, the coffee versus cocoa or tea, as opposed to stirring up soup or egg yolks or something that's has more solids to it, or it's harder to mix. No, I think that really does make a difference. What kind? I mean, when you use a whip, when you want a whipped cream, you have those whippy thingies, whatever they're called. Whisk, yeah. So whether you use a whisk, a fork, a spoon, a stirrer, I think it depends on the material and the homogeneity or lack of homogeneity of the things you're trying to mix.
And viscosity?
Yeah. So for example, in a cake mixing, machine, you've got, the beaters, or so the different kinds of beaters. If you're doing dough, you use a dough hook. If you're making a cake mix, you use the regular beaters. You might use a fork if you're doing fudge by hand. Have you ever done the fudge stirring by hand?
If you're doing taffy, you have the things.
Oh yeah, the fingers, yeah. So I think it does depend on the viscosity and the non-homogeneity of the materials. if you've got solids on the bottom that you want to raise, then maybe the fork is better than the spoon to lift up the solids to get them to dissolve.
Yeah,
But
'cause
in
the spoon has
in-
that single point where the fork has multiple.
Right, but in coffee and cocoa, that's not really a strong consideration. Like I use Ovaltine in my coffee, and Ovaltine is very light, and it doesn't settle the bottom and stay on the bottom, and I've got to really lift it. It practically dissolves as it falls. So yeah, maybe for sugar, well, sugar doesn't stick to the bottom either. So we
I
kinda make
still-
this- Go ahead, Stacy.
I was gonna say, as somebody who mixes a lot of liquids, I still think that the speed that you get the liquid to churn in
Yeah.
has something to do with it. And usually the spoon will get the liquid to churn more. Than the water's doing the work of the mixing.
Right, it's a paddle. The spoon is more like a paddle.
Okay, so I get that. So let me see if I'm doing something stupid. In order to try and do this, I think, okay, so I put my now put aside the fact that some snobs would not be drinking instant coffee. Okay, but I do drink instant coffee.
Oh, God.
And and I use sometimes a spoon, okay? And I stir it, and I notice that most of the coffee is going the same direction, and yet there's these clumps of creamer. Again, I use this non-dairy creamer that's this powder, okay? That is sort of going along with the surface of the liquid. So I say, okay, maybe that's not mixing as quickly as I should. So every 10 times I go around the cup, I reverse direction and go another 10 times.
Yeah,
Right? That seems to cause more stirring, which to me is indicative that if you're pushing all this liquid around with a big surface, it's all mostly going to go the same way, right? Whereas if you now introduce this reverse direction, now all of a sudden you're causing it to, like get all chaotic and then mix more, it seems, until it's all going the other way again. And so I'm wondering, could you cause that by a different technique of stirring, a different pattern, not a circular one, or two, using a different device, like
think-
fork?
I think you should put a top on it and shake it.
Aha, there's another idea. There it is.
then you have those
Although-
little stirrers.
Do they make tops for standard coffee mugs? That's actually a good invention, Stacy. Maybe you should patent that. Put it on a
See,
coffee
Barry,
mug.
I am an independent thinker. I want that on the record.
It's on the record. It's recorded, okay, Stacy? So patent that thing, so I can safely mix it up and get the coffee all mixed up and then remove it, okay, and still have most of my coffee in my mug.
But Sam, I have to tell you, I don't know how big of a market there is for instant coffee drinkers who use fake cream.
And then there's those little electric stirrers that have a stem and then kind of a horizontal piece of metal at the bottom that rotates with a little bit of, flanges on it. It's, what I'm talking
There's such a
about.
device?
Yeah.
Like a blender?
No, well, no, there are these tiny little stirrers that have a stem. It spins, but at the bottom of the stem is this probably doesn't show up too good because this is the wrong color.
Oh,
But it's a horizontal disc at the bottom that's rotating, but it's not a flat disc. It's got little, burrs on it. And those are the ones that they use to stir, I don't know, some kind of drink.
Are they like little sip straws? I think they're like little spoons, like at the bottom, almost like a spoon, and maybe you could
The
sip
thing at
through.
the bottom is just a horizontal metal disc that's not very big.
Oh, metal?
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
they could be plastic too, but I think the ones I've seen,
Is
because
it
it's
fixed or is it spinning?
sorry.
Is it fixed or is it spinning?
The bottom disc is fixed to the stem, and the stem is on a tiny little battery handle so it's rotating. So
Oh, on a battery. Oh, I know what you mean. You're talking about, it's like, you could use it to whip potatoes.
oh, not that big. The ones used for drinks are much.
Oh, because he's talking about batteries.
Yeah. Since I don't own one, I don't know the brand name or model or
Okay.
even.
So my next question on this one is, if one actually grew up in a family that used instant coffee, okay, I admit that's not everyone,
Well, I
okay,
did.
then the way you make it, in other words, take a spoon, stir it this way. Did it ever occur to say, is that the best way or should I do it a different way? Or was it just, that's accepted and I've done it the rest of my several decades here?
We're talking about the 1950s.
I'm like you, Sam. If I have a fork and that's clean and I don't want to dirty a spoon, I will use that. I'll use the back end of something to, I mean,
Here's another thing. If you're using instant coffee, you have to.
But
spoon
Stacy was
it.
in the middle of saying something, right?
no, it's pretty much done. It's okay. It was a natural flow. When you're three people and you're friends, I don't see a problem with jumping in when there appears to be.
I just want to be as respectful as I can be.
Yeah, but you know what? I would be the first one to say, Barry, I'm still talking. But I appreciate that. But I think that sometimes, and I do want to bring this, Barry, I'm going to take a minute if you don't mind, because I think this is important too. I think sometimes people will step up to protect someone, and it actually hurts the group in a way. And sometimes it helps. On a call recently, I stepped up in a protective way like that. And I think it was a very positive thing and it led to positive changes. But I've seen other times on this call, not necessarily you, other people do that when they should have stayed out of it and let the people deal with each other. Because we have to learn to deal with each other too. So I think that we have to be very careful when we step in the name of trying to do something good.
Yeah, I was also watching Stacy's countenance, and not only did she stop speaking, but her countenance indicated that she was done speaking. That's why I stepped in, because I wanted to point out that with instant coffee, you need a spoon to scoop the instant coffee out of the jar. And now you've got the coffee in the spoon and you're going to use it to stir. So you would never scoop it out with a fork. That wouldn't work. So you end up using one implement to do both jobs. Makes sense.
Okay, to show you how plebeian I am, there are these little packets that have a fixed volume of powder. And all you got to do is tear open the packet, dump it in the mug, okay? And no spoon involved, okay? Yeah, there's additional cost in the packaging probably, okay? So I'm not a good human being. But anyway, that's the option that I'm using right now.
What's in the packet?
It's actually it's a mixture of coffee and a slight sweetener and
Mixes
slight
it for
creamer.
you?
And powdered creamer all together, the sugar and the powdered creamer and the coffee all in the packet.
Yeah, I
So
think it's called
three-
Kopiko, Kopiko, you know, so it's just all right there.
Yeah.
If, you know, I'm indicating, you know, how lazy I am, okay, I'm just describing to you.
Well, I'm just thinking that everybody has to then drink it with the same amount of sugar. Like you can't customize your coffee.
Well, you
Add-
could afterward though, right? You're not limited to that.
Well, no, I don't put sugar in. So for me, I don't want to drink
Right,
it.
you
at all.
won't want any of it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
The other thing though, like for example, I buy Ovaltine, and I don't know if you've ever looked at Ovaltine, but the granules are actually pretty big and light, whereas instant coffee granules are very small and dense. And the Ovaltine is easy to dissolve because the granules are large and light and kind of airy, and the instant coffee granules are tiny and dense. They're much harder to, they take more effort to dissolve because they're denser, tinier and denser. I can pour, you know, right out of the jar. I can pour a nominal amount of Ovaltine and I hardly have to stir it at all. It just is.
How many
sort of
times do you
dissolves.
stir? If one of you actually is presented with instant coffee, how many times do you stir it?
Boy, it's been so long since I've had instant coffee.
Till the color looks right.
But I do stir sugar and Ovaltine into my real coffee, my drip maker, and I stir it for 3 or 4 rounds for like a second or two.
Interesting. I find, okay, so that's already coffee. Okay, so it's not,
Right.
powdered
Yeah.
plus some kind
And
of.
I can do this. So if it started to settle, I can just do this.
Yeah.
And that's good enough to, what's the right word? Redissolve the settles. Any solids that have settled out.
So I
Especially
find
if I put
myself
ice
with
cream.
instant coffee and the creamer stirring 40 times, 10, 10, 10, 10.
Holy shamoly. I mean, boy, no. My stuff is dissolved within zip, we're done. And then if it sits here for 30 minutes, I can just do that and we're done. I also put ice cream in it. And if I put ice cream in it that has like fudge swirl,
Wait, ice cream?
Mhm.
All right.
I put in vanilla chocolate or fudge swirl, or often ice cream that has a little bit of chocolate sort of in it. And if I use the fudge swirl, that fudge will sometimes tend to settle out, and I'll do that after 20 minutes. But yeah, so I'll put ice cream, milk, whole milk, Ovaltine, and sugar. And the coffee already could be a flavored coffee, like I don't know, vanilla. What's the name? What are
French vanilla?
French vanilla, for example. I used to buy the cappuccino flavored one, but they stopped providing it. I guess the cappuccino flavor was too expensive, and they discontinued it.
I was 32 years old before I found out that some people put honey in their coffee.
Tea, yes, not coffee.
In their coffee.
I never
Yeah.
did it.
Yeah, definitely in tea, but not coffee. I never put honey in coffee.
And I found out because I was in Germany for my honeymoon, and we were at effectively an Airbnb, but kind of a bed and breakfast of a friend of mine. And that family introduced me to putting honey in coffee.
Yeah, okay. It's not unreasonable. It's just sugar is so much more convenient. Honey is a mess because you got to have that little twirly thingy, twirl the honey to stick to the little honey,
Yeah.
and then you got to stir it until it dissolves off of the dipper. It's a mess to deal with
But
honey.
people feel it's healthier.
It is. I mean, honey is better for you than sugar. It's true.
So that's why.
I still have doctors tell me honey's bad for me.
Really? Did they say why?
Sugar.
Well, then they're just going to say sweet sugars are bad for you, period. Whether it's honey or
Yeah.
granulated sugar, white or
I was-
brown.
I haven't done enough research.
What, Stacy? You're starting to laugh, but you're not saying why.
When you first said that, I was like, Sam doesn't have to worry about a period. I didn't realize that you
Wait,
were
is that
just
what Barry said?
that you were
Affects
just
my period?
wait.
Affects my monthly mood?
Yeah, it took a
So I
while.
am so hangry right now.
Oh, that went right past me. That didn't register.
Wait, Stacy, did Barry actually talk about my period?
Barry said, Sam's not with that. Sugar's not good for Sam's period.
Oh, I get it. Okay, all right. Okay.
Oh, I just heard myself. Hi, Josh.
Yeah. Oh, Josh is here. I didn't see him come in.
Anyway, I found that question. Hey, Josh. That question illuminates certain assumptions and illuminates certain unconscious behavior that I thought I could bring up for just possible consideration, not because it's important, but because it's, for me, a perspective.
Well, I think that's a very good question to ask people privately, and it gives you a lot of insight into the way they think.
Rather than what's your sign? Do you like
Yes.
walks on the beach?
Yes.
Do you like puppy dogs? Do you like apple pie?
I was married to somebody who could only do something if it had already been done before. I mean, I remember having a whole disagreement. We were remodeling the kitchen and I wanted to place a certain molding tile in a certain location. And he was like, that's not where it goes. He was in that business. That's not where it goes. I was like, well, that's where I like it. But that's not how to, we wound up doing that and everybody loved you know, I really have to say I did a really good job of designing this kitchen. But the whole idea that if it hadn't been seen somewhere first, you can't do it.
Hmm.
Me, because I am a free thinker, that was craziness.
Sometimes free thinking can get you into trouble. A correspondent of mine had bought a really nice iMac, the modern iMac, and it had the wireless Magic keyboard, you know, the Bluetooth keyboard. I don't know if either of you have the latest model, but unlike my keyboard, which has got the keys that can be depressed like a good 1/4 inch, these have very flat keys. They only go down about 1 or 2 millimeters, and so they're flat on top, and the frame of the top of the keyboard is also flat. So anyhow, she had trouble seeing the printed letters, so she put stickers on every key with great big size lettering. And then she says, this keyboard doesn't work. The keys, I press the key and nothing happens. I'm thinking, she's probably put stickers that are wider than the keys. She pushes them down, they paste the key down, and the key is stuck. And I'm thinking, she doesn't realize that these keys have to be free to move. And if you put a sticker on them that's too big, you're going to tape the damn keys down to the keyboard. And they have to move only 1 millimeter or 2. But it never occurs to her that that's why the keyboard doesn't work. Brand new keyboard, you know?
Yeah, but that's bad thinking. Free thinking doesn't have to be bad thinking.
Well, that's the point, is that you don't always think of the downside issues that are going to interfere with the functionality. You're thinking about the visible part that you want. You want to see big lettering on the keys, and you don't think about, but the stickum is going to get on the edges of the keys, and they're going to stick in the slot and get taped down. And I'm going, that's the first thing I would think about, is does it interfere with the functionality?
Well, this is my greater concern, because that's what I wish groups would do more of. Instead of shooting down ideas, looking for what might go wrong, tweaking it without throwing out the whole idea, though.
Right.
Because too often people will push back, throw out the whole idea, and then people just butt heads. And that happens in Congress all the time. And we wind up with really crappy bills because we didn't work together to really work at all the things that we needed and the best possible fixes.
Yeah, reckoning the downsides and balancing the upsides and the downsides, that's systems thinking. And you got to really be consistent about reckoning the positive and negative, the pros and the cons. And people will look at, say, the pros and ignore the cons, and then they get stuck with something that's dysfunctional. It works great for half a year, and then it fails. It has a failure mode that's quite predictable but not anticipated.
But on the other side of that, the other problem is there is a reluctance to think outside the box and do what has never been done.
I agree with that. Yeah, but the reason that's hard is that you can think of a good reason. It's hard to foresee the downsides. It's easy to anticipate the good sides, really hard to reckon with some physics, the downsides.
I think sometimes we don't even get to that point, though. I think about something like taxes, and I don't even think we ask the right questions about taxes.
We don't.
Yeah.
We don't do a good job of systems thinking, which is not news to this group. I'll give you another story. A lady in the fix-it brings into the fix-it shop a wall clock, and it's a battery wall clock. It's got a double A battery in it. So she says, I just put a fresh battery in it, it doesn't work. So I look at it, I take the battery out, I test this, it's good battery. I go to put it back in, I go, oh, she put it in backwards. Now, here's the question. Do you tell her that she put the battery in backwards, which could be a little embarrassing, or do you leave her in a state of ignorance so the next time she's going to not pay attention to which way to put the battery in? We had an argument. Go ahead, Stacy.
You tell her.
My position is yes, you tell her, because even though she could be a little bit embarrassed for a minute, she won't make that mistake in the future. Or if you don't tell her, she probably will make the same mistake in the future, just to save her for 2 minutes of embarrassment in front of 1 or 2 people. So we had an argument between myself and the clerk, who said, "Oh, don't tell her that. Yes, if you're
Aye.
gonna fix something, tell them why it didn't work and what they can do to not repeat the failure mode.
Can I expand slightly the
please.
question? I mean, you're in there, she's actually standing in front of you, right? You can actually see who this person is, right?
She's already left by the time I discovered the problem. She had dropped it off and I didn't get to look at it until she had actually walked away.
Okay, so you have little information about her demeanor, her communication
I had
style, or
some information because I did chat with her before she left, but not to the point where I had already figured out why it didn't work.
yeah, but what I'm saying is a little knowledge about the person
Yeah.
might give you clues about whether or not they're curious about the cause or whether they just want the problem solved. Right?
Yeah, yeah. And she
Like-
had bought a new battery and put it in.
I just had an estimator come yesterday, estimate how much gravel I need to, put on my new driveway since I've been here 6 years, right? And I don't necessarily know how and how he does it. I just want it done.
Right.
So if he wanted to explain to me how he calculates that it's got to be 2 or 3 inches and how he's got to, scrape the surface first, how he's got to line up the rocks on this side and, make it a little more. Maybe I want to hear that. Maybe I don't want to hear that. Right. So I'm thinking yesterday was a nice way to have a conversation with him and he explained all about what he was going to do. And I had the time. It was fine. But there are people that just say, yeah, I just want the gravel and I want to be done with it. Right. So I'm saying a little bit of information about who you're dealing with might give you a clue and advise you, yeah, let's mention it. It was in backwards. Takes half a second. Okay.
Right.
Or let's not mention it because she's so frazzled. She got 3 kids and 2 dogs that she's got on her way, all this sort of thing. Right. So there's information you can use to make that call. Over.
Well, I think where you draw the line is, or how you decide, is that by Barry telling her, that's something that will give her the power to next time not do that. By the driveway guy giving you information, that's not empowering you. That's wasting your time. That's not information that you need.
Once in a lifetime job versus a job you might do every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, and as far as the clerk who said, don't tell her she'll be embarrassed, I have a real hard time when people think they can decide for other people how they might feel, especially over something simple like that. There's no reason. Why should she be embarrassed? You're assuming there's something to be embarrassed over.
I would be thrilled to learn something that the absence of that knowledge is causing me dysfunctionality. If I can't diagnose it, somebody else can. That's a boon, I think. You were going to say something, Sam?
I encountered a quote this morning, just before this session. It was attributed to John Wayne. Perhaps it's actually accurate. It said, I am responsible for what I say. I am not responsible for whether you understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think in absolute terms, I completely agree with that. But there's another additional perspective, which is if you really try to communicate with somebody, then you probably do want to understand whether that person got what you're trying to say.
Right.
And you might then take that person's attributes into account so that you can express yourself perhaps differently.
Yep.
For maximum retention, perhaps, right?
And
So
then
I'm just saying that simple concept is a very individualistic one. So, hey, ain't my problem, whether you get it or not. But if you're really thinking the us phenomenon, the we phenomenon, the interaction phenomenon, the connecting communication phenomenon, then you do kind of care.
I have a question.
I think.
Barry, did you charge her for fixing it?
No, first of all, we only charge for parts. Now, it turned out that this particular clock also had a pendulum, which had a separate battery, which doesn't actually do anything. It's just for show. And the battery for the pendulum was dead. But when you go to measure the batteries, you really have to inspect it to determine which battery goes to which circuit. So I determined that one battery was good, one battery was bad, but I didn't know which one was doing which function. So I had to charge her $1 for the battery I replaced, which turned out to be the pendulum power supply. And the other battery, which was good, was in backwards.
But my point is that brings in another factor. If you weren't going to charge her, but yet she was left thinking that you fixed something when you didn't fix it, then there's a level of dishonesty there. So you could look at it like that and say, well, in order to make everything transparent, I had to explain that you're not being charged because the only thing wrong was the battery was in backwards.
Yeah, but we only charge, this is a volunteer job. We only charge for parts.
No,
We
I know,
don't-
I'm just bringing in that there's
Although
more
people
information.
can make a voluntary contribution just in general without regard to the amount of labor, independent of the labor. So people sometimes leave $5, $10 donation plus pay for any parts that we had to buy. For example, another lady brought in these Christmas carousels, with the music and the go rounds. And she had used the wrong size power supply. She used a 12-volt power supply where it wanted a 6-volt one, and our power supply had burned out, which was independent of it being the wrong size. So we had this box of old power supplies, just junk power supplies laying around, and I found one that was the right voltage and the right amperage. And I said, we do not charge for giving you a piece of junk equipment. I said, I'm going to give you this 6-volt power supply for free, because otherwise it's going to sit here and rot in a box up here and they'll eventually have to be thrown away. We do not charge if we give them used parts that have just been salvaged, cannibalized out of old defunct stuff. And I would much rather give away something that's worth next to nothing than have to go through the rigmarole of charging them and doing all the paperwork. I mean, for $1, or $2, what's the point? Especially if they're going to give you a $10 tip. So, but I err on the side of giving stuff away, especially if it's sort of antique, obsolescent, surplus, cannibalized from old stuff.
I'm
I now
gonna
have-
run out. And if I get back in time, I will check to see if you're still here.
Barry, I know what you mean. I have a garbage bag full of old power supplies and power adapters that I don't know what they go to anymore, but I keep them because they're all weird stuff, like 5 volts, 0.3 amps or 1200 milliamps or 6 or 20 or 24 or whatever. And those devices that they used to go to are probably tossed because they're,
Yeah.
longer.
They failed before the power supply failed.
Yeah.
And you
But-
don't want to eventually put these in the garbage dump. You want to sort of put them back into service if you can. And I would rather give them to somebody to use than store them indefinitely
Yeah.
until.
And yet, when you really want one very specific one, like yesterday, I was looking for a 24-volt something or other for a scanner, that I bought off of eBay with no power supply, right?
Yeah. Chances are I have it.
When you need it, it's valuable. So, if you
Right.
go to Amazon, they're going to charge you $20 for one of those power things, and finally managed to find one on eBay for like $9. But let's hope.
Yeah. I mean, I would give you one for the price of postage if I have the specs that you want. Between the Fix-It shop and my own supply, I got tons of old stuff that I'd be happy to give away, except for the fact that the shipping on might actually be more than it would cost to go to the store and buy a fresh one.
Yeah.
You guys are going to start a company called H&K, used parts.
One of my favorite stores in the Bay Area since the early 80s, it's now defunct, was a company called Halted. It doesn't mean anything, it's just a name. But it was aisles and aisles of these plastic bins and buckets of just the oddest stuff. Like there'll be nuts and bolts of all different sizes, power supplies, circuit boards, cases, turntables, speaker cabinets, cables of all kinds,
Right.
odd little connectors, plastic insulators. It was just like a huge warehouse of this stuff.
It's like the
And-
Nordstrom rack of fries electronics.
But it's all used. See, it's all used, and it's like some of it's rusty and some of it's perfect, So it's just like this hobbyist's
Junkyard.
Toys R Us. It's a Toys R
Yeah.
Us for hobbyists.
Right.
Okay, you can go in there and can spend hours and hours, just say, not only looking for what you need, but thinking, what the hell needed this part? And then learning stuff about it, and say, that's odd. So it's just a fun place to go. I used to go in just every weekend just because either I needed something or I needed to kill time or a friend of mine wanted to go. That's when I was doing a lot of assembly of my own computers and, needing special jumpers and special cables and special circuit boards and special soldering irons and, solder and all that stuff. That was how I was spending my spare time way back in the 80s.
It's the old Frankenstein. It's alive. Bringing some dead piece of technology back to life.
That's fun.
It's just a thrill to literally bring some dead system back to life.
Yeah. I mean, here's how much of a geek I am. In the early 80s, maybe mid 80s, probably around 80, it was not late 80s, okay? How many of you had a multi-processor CPU with a real operating system and getting real work done on it in the mid 80s?
Well, at work, yeah.
No, I mean, as a hobbyist,
As a hobbyist, no,
that you actually put together.
no, not in the 80s, no.
Yeah.
Not in the 90s, yes.
Heterogeneous
I-
processors, not the same processor, not the same core.
Well, I assembled.
Sorry, it's just funny watching. I love your enthusiasm, Sam. This is awesome. You're bringing me back to, I didn't even care about computers until my brother-in-law started popping them open and sticking a little thing on my wrist and be like, don't move. Electrostatic energy, don't move. And I'm like, I don't want to move. I don't want to be here. And he's like, no, you're taking apart the computer with me. Shut up. Give me the RAM.
Not only that, you open them up, they're mostly empty space. A lot of wasted space.
Yep.
It can be a whole lot more effective. That's why I like the NUCs that I have. I'm about to buy another NUC. I love those things.
Got 2 of them already.
I got 2, and you know what? They travel really well. You know that? They're a lot easier to travel with than a laptop.
Are you guys messing around with the new Raspberry Pis that are out there? Like $5.
No.
I'm
don't
not.
really-
I would love to.
What would I do with it?
What would
Build
you
a
not do
controller
with
of
it?
some kind.
Do whatever you want. Exactly. It's so
Put it
nice.
on a drone,
Put it on put it on a mug. Make a smart mug. I don't know.
I have a 2009 Mac Mini over here, which topped out at El Capitan some years ago. It's running High Sierra now.
All right. Well, I'll connect it to my Raspberry Pi.
I have another one that topped out at Catalina, 2012 Mac Mini topped out at Catalina. It's running Monterey now. This Mac Pro that I'm on literally right now topped out at Lion. It's running El Capitan now.
Actually,
Good stuff.
I do have a project that I have to do and probably don't even have time to do it. It
I'm
involves my
surprised no one's watching the World Cup. You guys didn't see it?
People are dying over there.
Are you
People
saying
are dying
literally?
over there.
There's
Are you saying literally?
There's an American journalist who died of a heart attack right in the middle of a game.
It's so exciting. I didn't think I watched the Amsterdam game yesterday.
The
And I
shootout?
just got hooked. What's that?
Was that the shootout game?
Yeah, the shootout at the end. It was exciting. It was, they were fighting like what gladiators, like bumping people with their chest, just like, I mean, the crowd was just giving them so much energy and they felt it, that World Cup energy. And it was an intense match. Argentina they were determined to win. It was,
Was that a metaphor shootout or a literal shootout?
they have to do 5 goal kicks at
It was
the
a literal
end.
shootout.
Yeah, a shoot like gunslingers with the soccer ball.
Oh. It's
At the
part
end of a
sport.
game, if it's still tied after 2 overtimes or something like that, they go to sudden death shootout.
Oh, that's called a shootout. Okay, because when you say shootout, I don't know if you're talking about a metaphor or the people actually brought out guns and started shooting.
No,
each other.
no one was shooting with guns. It was just soccer balls.
You have to be real careful with these metaphors.
Yeah. No, it was exciting. It just ended. That's why I was able to get on. Is Morocco just beat Portugal?
Yeah. So
1-0.
sudden death, but not physical death. It's just another
Yeah.
metaphor.
But Barry, I
For the
came
record,
on.
Who's
Oh,
left?
good.
Who's left in the World Cup? Who's
Oh my
alive?
gosh, France! I think France is playing England, and I forgot the other game. So it's like down to the final 4.
So
After
isn't
this
Brazil
next game.
expected to win?
Brazil's. Are they
They
still in it?
lost, didn't they?
I think they're out.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think they're
really?
already out.
Oh, the last
I
I
would
heard
say-
they were slated to win.
I think
They're always slated to
Argentina.
win.
Yeah, Messier is the big star from Argentina. He was dominant in the last game.
Hmm.
But yeah, I came on, Barry, because I was trying. I don't have Facebook on my computer, so I have to log in with an old iPhone just to get on Facebook. But I was wondering if you got the Chat GPT. Have you checked this out, Sam? They opened up the OpenAI Chat GPT.
I signed up. I haven't spent any time with it yet. It's evidently doing some pretty amazing stuff.
I'm blown away. I wrote 4 grants already. I wrote 20 songs. It'll do anything you want and just say, do it in the style of gangster rap. And it will write a chorus, a verse, a bridge. And then you say, try better, do it in the style of Ice Cube or Ice-T or Snoop Dogg. And it's amazing.
You know,
So-
Stack Exchange and Stack Overflow have disallowed any content from Chat GPT or GPT-4 or any of those ML sources. Because when it comes to technical subjects like programming, they're often wrong, but yet people submit them from Chat GPT anyway. And it
Yeah.
takes a lot of time for people to say, this is bogus. But the stuff that they come up with appears smart, appears correct, but it's actually not, and it doesn't run, you know?
Right.
So you
Yeah,
gotta be careful in a very technical field. Like I wouldn't use it for computer programming yet, okay? Sooner or later it's gonna get there. But it's, you know, evidently not there yet. And the community there has already learned this and they're banning that content. Now for art, yeah, you can't like test art, you know? It doesn't have to pass an acceptance suite in order to pass as art or grammar or even a grant proposal, okay? Somebody else will evaluate that, but you know, just for submitting it, you don't actually have a submissions acceptance test. So there are cases where you can use it, especially like selfies, you know, that people are using it for. But yeah, it's very interesting stage of technology acceptance we're in right now. It could be good, it could be dangerous, and yet we're not smart enough to make that distinction.
Well,
Right, so to answer Josh's question, 2 things I want to say. Number one, this morning on NPR on Weekend Edition Saturday with Scott Simon, he did a segment on Chat GPT, including some poetry and maybe some essays. And then he asked some experts in poetry to critique it. So if you can catch the playback from this morning's Scott Simon on Weekend Edition Saturday on NPR, there's maybe a 5 or 10 minute segment on it. The other thing, I did respond to you on Facebook. Here's what happened. I went to register, and when you register, it uses another system called, I forget the name, the other system to register. They have some umbrella system that allows you to do registration.
OpenAI?
No, OpenAI is the actual client, but they use a different system to create login accounts, which I forget the name of it. Anyway, so I went through that rigmarole, and that was a mess for a number of reasons, which I don't go into, but I eventually got to the point where I could provide email credentials and get back an email confirmation. So now I'm finally logging into OpenAI, finally.
okay.
And OpenAI is now saying, let me get some profile information. I fill it all out, and the last thing it wants is my cell phone number for final verification. So I give it my Google Voice number because it wants to send an SMS text. It says, we don't take a Google Voice. We don't take, not real cell phones. You have to give us a real cell phone number. I said, all I got is a landline and a Google Voice number. They said, sorry, we don't honor your login credentials. So
Yeah.
I could give them your cell phone, and you could, act as my agent and say, yeah, this guy's for real. But then that would mean that your cell phone would be there in their database, which you probably don't want.
And subsequent attempts to log in by you might involve that particular cell phone number.
Or we
Possibly.
could have fun right now. You could just log in with my password. I could just give it to you right now.
If you wanted to give, you'd have to give away your email address that you used and the password you used with it. And then it might let me log in, except it might also notice that I'm coming in from a Boston area IP address, and then it might want to send you is this really you? And then
I have an 857 prefix myself, by the way, Barry.
is that a Google Voice?
Yes.
Yeah, this won't take it. And First of all, I couldn't tell the difference between the company that was providing the login credentials and OpenAI itself, the client. And so the people who were doing the credentials then sent me a message saying, welcome aboard this, whatever their name was, OTKA or something. We're ready to help you and your team, set up your site. And I go, what? I'm not setting up a site. I just wanted to log into OpenAI and look at Chat GPT. And I actually got an email from a human. She says, I'm a human. My name is whatever. And I write her back and I didn't hear back from her. But the thing is, she can't do anything.
Prove she's human.
She can't do anything because the issue is that OpenAI wants to send me an SMS on a real cell phone.
Barry, I'm getting exhausted. Just call up Sam Altman and tell him to get his act together.
Yeah, he's making an assumption that everybody has a cell phone. That's
Well, I mean, I do, but I don't have a Verizon cell phone number. This is on a Wi-Fi and it uses Google Voice. And except if I'm in the car, but I don't use it in the car because I'm driving. So I use that if I'm, in a coffee shop or something and I can get a Wi-Fi, then I can have a phone number.
So it won't surprise you, Barry. There are services out there on the web that'll give you a valid phone number for that very reason.
A one-time
Temporarily,
only or something? Or,
Yes,
Mhm.
a one-time use cell phone number.
Yeah, but then if they want to send you subsequent SMSs, to, re-verify, then I'm screwed.
Yeah, there are services that supply that as well.
Yeah, but there's definitely some sites that simply say, oh, that's a VoIP number, like Google Voice. It's a VoIP number. We don't honor VoIP numbers. And turns out that OpenAI is one of them that wants it and doesn't honor it if it's VoIP.
Well, because this is a really big deal. What's going on is they're actually going to be, not only are they training the model, but they're looking at who is saying what to the model and keeping track of that. And then on top of it, we spent the whole week, all of like 100 of my nerd friends, tricking the GPT to do things it said it couldn't do. So it'll say, I'm just a model. I can't do that. And we're like, yeah, you can. Just imagine you can do it. And it's like, no, I really can't. And it's like, okay, I'll try harder. And then it's trying harder. And then imagine you are this person, do it as that person, not as yourself. And it's really fun. We're having a great time with it.
Yeah. So I would have played with it, except I ended up spending a couple of hours failing to get it.
So sorry. I'm sorry, Barry. I can give you if you want to log in right now, I'd give you my password because it's that amazing.
I'd have to write it down so I don't lose it or put it in the chat. I don't want to put it in the chat because that's going to end up being published. Let me write it down, piece of paper.
Well, the video is being shared also, just FYI.
Oh, that's
I'm aware
right.
of
Yeah,
it.
you can't.
I'm aware.
So you have to give it to me on Facebook Messenger.
No,
You're
I have
right.
to do we have to do a cryptic,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
the thing
zero
is,
secrets exchange.
I don't know how to do a what's it called, a shared secret thingy. I don't know how to do that without a computer.
Zero knowledge or something like that.
I forget the name of that system where.
Yeah, it's funny. We're so smart. We're stupid. Like I could just put it in the chat and the chat wouldn't be on the video on YouTube.
No, but the point is the chat becomes public at some point.
We can edit it out.
Well, then all I have to do is change my password by the time that happens. So, I mean, it's
Yeah,
not
but then
that
I
hard.
can't use it again. But the one time.
The bottom line is we got to get you on it because I know you like to play with chat bots and this is the best one I've ever seen. It's amazing.
Well, I mean, if I have to get a real cell phone just to do that, I don't know that it's worth it because a real cell phone is like, I don't know, $80 a month or something, and I never would use it.
Nah, you can get the Obama phone.
But I already have a phone. I mean, I already have a Droid.
No,
It's
just
Droid
the
2.
government will give you a free phone. Just say I'm a senior citizen and blah, 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 and then fill it out and they'll give you a free phone. Just say you're a homeless person on drugs.
I'm not
and they'll give you a
homeless.
free phone.
I live in a condominium.
No, but don't tell them that. Just tell the government you're homeless.
Yeah.
You got kicked out of your condo, apply for the form, they give you a free phone.
Then
And
I
then
have to
say,
use my,
oh,
but then I have to use my
Yeah.
real ID with the federal government. Real ID has my real residence in it.
yeah,
This is
I gotta
really
meet.
funny. You know, I'm due to renew my driver's license here in Massachusetts, and they give you the option of having your driver's license be a federally authorized real ID as opposed to just a Massachusetts driver's license. But if you want the real ID, you got to bring in 3 pieces of original material, original identification, like a passport, a birth certificate, and an electric bill or something to prove where you live. And you got to do it in person. And I got to do it before my birthday. And because I'm over 75, I have to get a new vision test. But I've had these glasses for more than 2 years and I'm due for a new prescription. So I got to get a new prescription before I turn 78 so that I can pass the vision test. And I got to go in person in the middle of January where it's probably going to be snowing that day. Just so I can renew my driver's license and get a real ID to prove that I live where I've been living for 35 years.
Bureaucracy sucks.
I tell you, and you can do all the preliminary stuff online, so you can fill in all the the data online. But as you're filling it in, it tells you progressively you're going to need to find 3 documents of the and it tells what kind of documents they are. So I go downstairs to see what I got. I come back and it says your session is expired. You have to start over. I started over 5. I had to start over 5 times because each time it told me something new that I had to go find. I had to go find my passports. I could give it the number. Had to go bring up my driver's license. I could give it the number. Each time it told me, I went downstairs to get something else that it didn't tell me. And each time I came back, it expired.
That's terrible.
It was, and then it said on the last one, oh, and by the way, we're going to have to give you a new vision test because you're over 75. I said, oh, now I got to make an appointment to get new eyeglasses. So I'm making an appointment to get new eyeglasses. It expires again. It took me like 2 hours, to go through this rigmarole to get ready to go in person to get my driver's license renewed.
You know what? I say just hack the system, go directly to the judge and get ready for your court case. And then when you get pulled over by the cop, just make sure you have no insurance, no license, and tell the judge beforehand that you're going to do that. So when you show up in his court, you say, I told you.
Technically, I'm really worried that time is going to run out before I get my driver's license renewed. And then I'm going to probably be driving without a renewed driver's license for maybe another month before all the paperwork gets untangled and and everything happens. Because getting an eye exam, having them grind the lenses, going down to pick up the new lenses, going to the RMV after you've got your new glasses to do all this paperwork. Then they're going to say, oh, and then there's the other thing. The US mail that you have to bring in to show that you're at that address has to be within the last 60 days. Well, it's probably going to be more than 60 days between the time I'm setting this thing up and by the time I actually get there. They're going to say, oh, this insurance bill that you brought in is now 63 days old. It's a no-go.
I think you'll figure it out. I don't think you'll have no problems.
I don't know. I just have to hope that I get, enough valid email from the US government or insurance or something that that they will accept as proof that I still live at this address that's not more than 60 days old by the time I actually show up in person.
Yeah, just go get a new library card. That'll be the final one.
I've already had to do that once. Oh, by the way, almost any large city library, if you have a library card, you can go to a site called Canopy, Kanopy, and download videos and stuff.
I think you were telling us about that last year.
Yeah, so any kind of documentary video that a library would normally carry. So they have this huge library. So it's like Netflix for documentaries.
Yep.
And your local library card will usually suffice to register at this Canopy site.
Well, Barry, I'm at a hotel in San Diego and the buffet closes at 10 and I have to meet Gisela before it. Well, no, I'm meeting her in 10 minutes. She's getting the baby ready. But I was going to say, is there anything I'm very curious to pick your brain and ask GPT something or do something that you've always wanted a smart chatbot to do. If there was something on your mind, I did type in effective computing, emotional learning, I was picking its brain on that, but is there anything that you would want to ask it while I'm here, I can do it for you live.
I would need a little bit of time to ponder that. I mean, I do recall when I was trying those really crappy ones, the Facebook chat bot that was a piece of crap, and the other one, I do recall trying to get into some in-depth technical discussion, and it was just a total lossage. You couldn't get anything that was. at
What
all
did you
accurate.
ask that one? Yeah, what was, if you want
Well,
to put it in the
wanted
chat,
to-
I'll just cut and
I
paste it.
wanted to find out if it was even aware of the discipline of affective computing and work that's related to what I and my colleagues have done in theories of emotions and learning and related stuff. And it would just change the subject.
How would you type that in the chat and I'll cut and paste it and ask it?
What do you know about affective computing and the role of emotions in learning? Is there any good theory out there that you could recommend I look at and see what it says?
Emotions and
And-
learning.
Yeah.
And then are there any good theories?
Any good theories out there that you can that you're familiar with? Because I want to see if there's anybody who's even remotely aware of the kind of work that we do at the Media Lab on affective computing, including, of course, my own work.
Okay, so this is what I typed in. Are you aware of the discipline of effective computing and the role of emotions in learning? So that's one question. And then I'll just do comma. Are there any good theories you can recommend? Make a list.
Yeah, that sounds right. And I would probably bet you dollars of donuts. It certainly hasn't heard of me. And it may have
You
heard
can
of
ask it. You want me to ask it if it's heard of you?
you can ask it. Have you heard of a theory and give it my name on cognition, affect, and learning?
Okay, well, it's the list it made is well, it's still typing. Still typing. This is the very end. Overall, the discipline of effective computing and the role of emotions in learning are complex and rapidly evolving area of research. There are many theories and models that have been developed to understand role models. What is the best theory?
Yeah. I would be very
Did a lot.
surprised. Say again?
It did a lot more than that. I just read the very last paragraph.
I
so I
said
didn't
I'd be
wanna-
very surprised if it can pull anything up on the stuff that I've done, let alone like would it mention Ross Picard's book called Affective Computing? Maybe. Would it mention the Media
It's-
Lab? Probably not.
It's the quality of rigor and evidence supporting the theory, good theory, blah, 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 clarity of coherence of the theory. Okay, I see what it's doing. It's just saying good theories are useful and relevant to real world.
Yeah. It's Jordan Peterson. It's not even wrong.
Well, the bullet points are the appraisal theory of emotions, which purposes that emotions are the results of evaluation of event and situation based on our goals, needs, and belief. The dual process model of emotion, the complex model of affect, which proposes the emotions can be organized into two dimensions: relevance, positive versus negative, and arousal, high versus low. The emotional intelligence EI model proposes emotions play a key role, our ability to understand. So there, it gave 5 different theories
Yeah.
in the effective learning model. And then I'm going to just type in, I'll see if I can, I'll put this all in an email and send it to you. Have you emailed me before, Barry? I don't know if I have your email.
Let me just double check that. If I go to email and put in your name, let's see if it comes up.
Yeah, if you want to put in me at joshuabridge.com.
Let's see.
And I'm asking it if it's heard of you.
Joshua Bridges invited you to the live notes for this meeting. Me at Joshua Bridge. Yeah, so I have a referral from you in which I'm invited to a meeting. This was dated last July. So I have your email from that. Yeah, because you'd also invited Doug. And
Okay.
yeah, so it was basically an email that you had caused to be sent out to a bunch of us. That's it. That's the only, so that's just because you had
If you-
invited a bunch of people to attend a online session or something.
Yeah, I'll let you play with it. It's trying its best not to get information on specific people.
Yeah, I could
But-
sort of get that, yeah. So it doesn't even
Um,
mention the pioneering book, Affective Computing by Roz Picard, which doesn't, I mean, if it doesn't mention her, then she's not going to mention anybody subordinate to her, which is pretty much
What's the name of the book?
The book is called Affective Computing, came out in 1997, I think. So we're talking about, what is that, 25 years ago? Yeah. It's a quarter, this subject has been out for 25 years.
Oh, it knows it. It says effective computing is a subfield of artificial intelligence, computer science that focuses on the development of computational systems that can recognize, interpret, respond to human emotions. It's not a specific book, rather a broad area of research and development. There are many books that have been published. And it goes on to Effective Computing by Rosalind Picard, the Oxford Handbook of Effective Computing, Raphael Clavo, Sydney, Emotional Intelligence, Science and Myth, Emotions and Personality. I'm sure you know all these books. Effective Computing and Intelligent Interaction by Anne. Do you know that one?
No.
It's by Annette. Oh, here, I'll put it in the chat then. So it's pretty good. I mean, this is quite the thing that's interesting is there's over 1 million people using it right now. So it's learning as we speak. So it's
Yeah,
only
I
going to
could
keep
say
getting
that
better.
the topic has been burgeoning for 25 years. And Roz travels all the time. She's always traveling around the world presenting material related to her research. She's done 2 TED Talks on it, and her subordinate has done 2 TED Talks as well. And there's at least 3 or 4 companies that are producing products based on affective computing. So it's been commercialized, both for health purposes and for
Gotcha.
marketing and advertising purposes.
Well, feel free to email me at joshuabridge.com and let me see if I can open up an account with another phone number, like an extra phone that I've got, and get you a password.
So that'll be great.
Then I think because Qcella has 2 phone numbers, one is for work and the other is personal. And
Yeah.
if she's okay with using the personal one, and then because I'd rather her phone get hacked than mine. So
As long as it doesn't have to be responded to on each visit, it'll work.
yeah. Oh boy, I was just about to meet her and the little baby went poopy. So oh man. Yeah, it's a really fun time. I'm starting to realize like this moment we're in, these type of chatbots and type of AI and natural language processing and language understanding are only going to be as good as the models. So there's this race for creating better models to train the system on. And it's kind of reminds me of when I first got into WordPress, there was this race for better blogging platforms and better callbacks to the server for the blogging. And there was, Joomla, Drupal, WordPress. So I don't know. I feel like I'm in a similar time to 2003
Yeah.
in terms of if analogous to this model training for these personal AIs. So it's
Yeah.
really fun time.
So, yeah, if you can catch that story this morning on Scott Simon's Weekend Issue Saturday, either of you might appreciate.
Oh, I spent literally 40 hours with people showing me what they're doing with it this week. So I'm all burnt out on it.
Okay. Yeah.
But by the way, I got my new AirPods. How do I sound on the mic?
You sound great.
Oh, good. Because these things are changing my life. They have noise cancellation inside of it. So it takes the outside noise and sends a signal that cancels what's going on around me.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah. It's really powerful. Like
Yeah.
it's helped me think a little bit because that low humming noise of like air conditioners and cars and trucks, it's nice when that just goes away.
Super. Super.
Yeah. All right, let me ask you, so if I can get you, let's try to get you account, and then I just would need, just send me an email and I'll try to sign it up with her phone number and your email address if that works.
Right. So I'm already logged, I'm already
And then if
registered
it
with my
sends-
Gmail email address, but I couldn't give them a cell phone, a real cell phone number for the last step of validation.
All right, well, let me see, let's try to work around that. Do a little hack. If someone will just donate their phone number.
Yeah. Or get them to allow, have some special dispensation for Google Voice numbers.
Yep.
Like if you were to sponsor me, they would allow somebody, somebody to represent and sponsor somebody else. That would solve the problem.
Yeah, the only problem with that is it starts getting registered in databases that phone number is connected to that email, and then all this weird wonky stuff starts happening.
That's the reason why I think people wouldn't want to let me borrow their cell phone number to validate my otherwise existing account at OpenAI.
Right. Well, and vice versa. You don't want to start getting regular mail under Cusella's name.
Yeah. And I suspect that's sort of designed to be, to make it sort of impractical to share emails and other people's phone numbers.
Yeah, phone numbers are the new, I've been telling people this for years, and I think people are starting to catch on, but phone numbers are the new social security, driver's license together in one.
Yeah.
Because that's how the government is tracking everything in their databases. They parsed out all the data from Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and they use all of that.
It'd be nice if there was a way for a landline to link to a Google Voice number. But even then, OpenAI says, well, we're not going to take a landline number and we're not going to take a VoIP number. So
Yeah.
even then you couldn't. I mean, theoretically, the phone companies could forward SMS to landlines to a corresponding SMS number.
Theoretically. Well, I got to go change a diaper, Barry. I'm going to say goodbye.
Okay. Talk to you next week or tomorrow. Whenever.
Talk to you next week or tomorrow. Cheers.
Bye-bye. Thanks for all the fish.
You're welcome. Cheers.
And there we are. Any other topics you want to dive into, or it's just the two of us? You're muted, Sam. You're muted. You're muted.
All right, sorry about that. No new topics. I think we're only about 23 minutes in, and I have a hard cutoff at the top of the hour.
Yeah. So if you're
But-
done, we can stop. If you have something else you want to chat with.
I was just going to mention, though, that my interest was in how this question about mixing coffee brought up assumptions, habits, thinking, limitations, all of that. I thought that was curious. I
Yeah,
was
that's realistic. Yeah.
I was going to be interested in what will happen if that was asked in a different group as well. But I think a small group of 3 was already interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's basically politics. You have an issue and you're going to have a bazillion. They used to say, if you have 10 Democrats, you have 12 perspectives on any topic.
At least.
So the point is that, yeah, it's like politics. You can get people talk off the top of their head. They're all over the map. And then when you hunker down and try to figure out what's practical, then it really narrows down to nothing's practical.
I did notice that the 3 of us, none of us said, well, let's do some experiments.
Well, but I've already talked about the fact that I have tried different methods and I found out the ones that are optimal for given scenarios that I actually use. And for scenarios that I never use, like I don't hardly ever make tea. Only I occasionally make tea if I happen to run out of coffee, but that almost never happens. So yeah, solving problems that never arise is sort of that's kind of a strange exercise, especially if you don't actually plan to do the experiment.
Mathematicians do that all the time, by the way.
Well, but that brings up another discussion that I'm having about when mathematics is kind of arcane and esoteric, the narratives that you provide to the non-mathematical public don't do justice to the math. And yet
You often
people,
can't even come up with a narrative.
that's like, for example, the Higgs boson, the Higgs field, good luck with the molasses or whatever. the hell it
Thousands
is.
of people have tried that.
And that's the problem that I see over and over again in science and mathematics is the narratives simply don't do justice. The metaphors don't work. They're misleading. They're naive. And the people who listen to the narratives don't really get the key idea of the math. When P.A.M. Dirac came up with this little a model of the electron, somebody asked him, how did you know it was right? And he said, because it was beautiful.
Dirac used that name, that idea a lot. He said, if it's not beautiful, it can't be right.
Yeah, and that basically, and by the way, that little formula is on his gravestone in Florida. I knew it was right because it was beautiful, which is a lovely narrative, but doesn't actually tell you.
But it's also not rational. Unless he has a different definition of beauty.
Yeah, aesthetics. Well, like, for example, Euler's relation is very beautiful.
To a mathematician.
Well, yeah, I suppose so, because maybe if you're not a
You
mathematician,
can't really do that, write it down and expect a standard art major in a college to say that's beautiful, though.
Yeah, although a lot of mathematicians agree it is the most beautiful formula in all of mathematics. Certainly, I would say so. But yes, if you don't really know,
What's the ugliest?
What would be the ugliest? Off the top of my head, no, I don't think
I've often heard, and my dad proposed that it's the solution to the quadratic equation. That's the ugliest.
Well, it's the ugliest one that everybody's probably been exposed to. Yeah.
Yes, because that's the one everybody learns in middle school or whatever it is.
And it's ridiculous. I mean, first of all, even though it's correct, it's hard to remember. It's hard to use. The other
It's got a
one,
square root in it. It's got minus signs in it.
yeah,
Got cross terms in it.
and the other one, which is simply challenging to do right, is Bayesian inference. Bayes' rule is really, really hard to pull off and not screw it up.
But it stacks. You just stack them up application wise.
Yeah. So yeah, but most people don't even. I mean, they may have heard of Bayesian inference. They may say, "Oh yes, I've heard about that." Have no clue what it is. And in fact, the famous Monty Hall problem is a Bayesian inference problem. And look at how many people couldn't figure out a trivial case of Bayesian inference in the famous Monty Hall problem.
Hey, don't trivialize that. It took Marianne Vos Savant to actually show people why you had to switch doors.
Yeah, I agree. That was like 30 some years ago. And
even very, very smart people at Harvard and MIT and other places thought, no, it makes no difference.
Yeah. Yeah, there were physicists who criticized her and said she was wrong. And these are physicists, who do mathematics as part of their theoretical work. So yeah, that was really kind of a shock. How
you have to specifically do statistics and probability too.
Yeah, that Bayesian inference couldn't even be reliably applied by people who have graduate degrees and academic credentials in the Monty Hall problem, which is about the simplest kindergarten problem you can come up with to introduce.
Yeah, everybody understands the problem. Very few people understand the solution. I'm still not sure I understand the solution.
Well, there's more than one way to present it. I eventually came across a narrative presentation that I thought was the clearest that I'd ever seen. But because most applications of it are a bit too symbolic and therefore they're hard to follow, because there really isn't a narrative.
Like, this is a crass example. Maybe I should stop the recording before I say it. But no, never mind. No.
You can mouth it.
To go down to the animal shelter and you're presented with 3 kittens. Never mind. Oh, well. All right, Barry. I have an estimator coming at the top of the hour, so I probably want to get a few things done before that person gets here. I'm trying to see if some bathroom work makes sense at this time.
Yeah, super. Well, enjoy the rest of the day and see you tomorrow, I presume.
Very good.
Okay.
I hope I'll have another question that you'll find worthy of discussion. All right.
Excellent.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.